Well, hi everyone. Happy Trans Awareness Week. I am a 23-year-old URI alum. I am a YouTube content creator, and I am a woman of transgender experience. I say woman of transgender experience when referring to myself because I first and foremost am a woman, and my experience of womanhood is that of transgender origin. Oftentimes, when I disclose to people that I am transgender or how I got to be where I am today, they'll say, wow, you're so brave. And while yes, bravery is an important part of what got me here today, to live my truth, to put my life online, and even to stand in front of all of you here tonight, it's not bravery that brought me here, it's determination. When I was a child, I was obsessed with The Little Mermaid. Her long hair, her pretty voice, and the ambiguity of what primary sex characteristics might set her apart from me, at the time, a little boy. I would tie t-shirts on my head and pretend it was long hair. I'll say it, I'm a stereotype. But as I grew older, these quirks became less quirky to others, and when I entered primary school, I quickly realized I did not fit in with the boys. While they were playing kickball at recess and tossing around a football, I was with the girls playing jump rope and make-believe, pretending we were fairies. I was in gym class. We were often separated in games as girls versus boys. And every time I would hide behind my female friends and hope the gym teacher wouldn't notice me there. But every time they did. And I would skulk my way back to the boys' side. The side that bullied me. The side that knew I wasn't like them. As the beginning stages of puberty took effect, the kids around me were thrilled about their voice cracks, their facial hair, their developing bodies, and I found myself petrified. Every day, I was examining myself in the mirror, nervous that I was going to wake up one day with a full beard and chest hair, and thankfully, that did not happen. And being that I was so feminine, everyone around me assumed that I must be gay. Even in elementary school, before I knew what being gay meant, I was told that's who I was. So I figured they must be right. I knew I had crushes on boys, but I also knew that I had crushes on girls. And at such a young age, I felt isolated, I felt different, I felt alone. As I grew older, these feelings only intensified. I was miserable. Even with a loving family and a good friend or two, I could not pull myself away from my daydreams of living as a woman. I tried. Oh, did I try. I played Little League Baseball. I went fishing with my dad. I even joined Boy Scouts. But the harder I tried to run for myself, the more miserable I became. The thought of aging as a male, of being a father, a husband, made me feel hopeless, and I began having thoughts of ending my life. In 2016, UCLA reported that 17% of LGBTQ adults have attempted suicide in their lifetime, in comparison to the 2.4% of the general US population. I resorted to self-injurious behaviors in the form of an eating disorder and physical self-harm. I thought to myself, if I can get as small as possible, if I can punish myself for being the way that I am, then maybe, just maybe, I can fit in like everyone else. As it turns out, forcing a square into a circle is never going to work. Around this time was the start of the It Gets Better project, an online-based nonprofit founded by Dan Savage in response to the suicide of queer teen Billy Lucas and the alarming number of queer youth who chose to end their lives before seeing the ways in which it could get better. I was almost one of these teens. This campaign consisted mainly of people in the LGBTQ+ community posting videos, sharing their story, much like I am with all of you right now. The times they felt alone, the times they felt worthless or trapped, and most importantly, the times they felt their life had changed for the better in time. When I found these videos, I was struck with the realization that no, I was not alone. That other people felt out of place in the same ways that I did, and they're living happy, healthy, normal lives, and I could as well. YouTube became my sanctuary, and YouTubers became my friends. Finally, there was another person just like me who was looking into the camera like they were looking in my eyes. They were laughing, crying, and growing with me. I knew then that one way or another, I wanted to be on the other side of that screen, to be that person that I needed so badly. Now, as I mentioned before, I grew up in the sticks. My school was literally in the middle of a turf field. One time my elementary school was closed down because there were cows loose. This was before Caitlyn Jenner. This was before Laverne Cox was on the cover of Times. We were not talked about in the media. I didn't meet another trans person until college, this college, in fact. The internet taught me that being different was okay, that you're never alone in your difference. And on top of that, I learned that the feelings I was having were called gender dysphoria, the misalignment of your birth sex characteristics with your gender identity. Having a word to the feelings was empowering, yes, but terrifying, because I realized that transition was the only option for me to live authentically. For what felt like so much of my youth, I was pushing away this person who I knew I was to try and fit in, but in reality, I was already being bullied and left out while not even being all that I knew I was meant to be. At last, I decided enough was enough. If I was going to be harassed, no matter what I did, I might as well live in my truth and keep my head up high. At the age of 14, I came out to my family and friends as transgender and let them know that I was going to be transitioning from male to female. This is not an easy thing for most people to digest, especially not your family who has known you their entire life, no matter how supportive they are. Every day, I thank my lucky stars to have the family that I do. They're actually sitting here in the audience tonight. And like any parent-child relationship, there have been bumps in the road, there have been challenges to overcome, but I never felt that I was without their love. Unfortunately, this is an uncommon experience amongst transgender individuals. I know many trans people who've been kicked out of their homes, forced into survival sex work, left to fend for themselves, all for something they cannot help. I began hormone replacement therapy at age 14. In my case, this was the process of blocking the body from producing testosterone, the male sex hormone, and supplementing it with estrogen, the female sex hormone, to undergo a sort of second puberty to develop as a female. This second puberty was about as fun as it sounds. The mood swings, the sore breasts, the stretch marks. I was crying at cat food commercials, but I embraced all of it because I missed out the first time. Yes, I was bullied for being transgender in high school. I was called names, I was spit on, had trash and food thrown at me. There was even a school-endorsed scavenger hunt where one of the items was get a picture with the tranny. But nothing could compare to the pain of hiding who I truly was. So I kept my head up high, put my headphones in to drown out the hate, and I walked proudly in my truth. Of course, this is not to say that I had an easy time. When I began using the restrooms in school, for example, I became a topic of discussion among many people, as you might guess. So much so, in fact, that I was on the local news for just trying to use the restroom. I had been pulled into the office of my high school principal and told that I couldn't use the women's restroom. When I inquired as to why, she asked me if I had a penis. I was 15 years old. Thankfully, many staff members in the school did support me, and I worked closely with the dean on getting the right to use the correct facilities. After months of collaborating with him, with my parents, with Annie Russell here at the Gender and Sexuality Center, and several attorneys from GLAAD, I finally set legal precedents in Rhode Island for transgender individuals to use the correct facilities. While I was thankful to blaze this trail for those coming after me, I didn't ask to be a trailblazer just to use the restroom. Well, I was ready to move on, so I worked hard and I graduated high school a year early at the age of 17. Finally, I thought, a clean slate, one where nobody knew me, where I didn't have to live with the label of trans floating over my head. Living stealth, as we call it, was not all it was cracked up to be. I got accepted to college, this college, the University of Rhode Island, and I was so excited to live the life of a normal college girl. But while I was stifling the label of trans woman to hide my past, I began to feel that same feeling of hiding that I did as a kid. I wouldn't make queer friends. My first time meeting another trans woman was on this campus, and I'm ashamed to say that there was a time that I wouldn't be seen in public with her or my queer friends out of fear that my secret would be revealed. I want to talk to you all about intersectionality, something that is talked about a lot on campus, and especially in our Gender and Women's Studies program, which I took part in. Intersectionality refers to our social classifications, such as gender, race, class, and sexuality, and the ways in which they do not exist alone. They're all interconnected. Being that I grew up in such a small town without the resources to travel, I was not introduced to many people from varying walks of life until I came here to URI. Hear about people that look different than I did, identified differently than I did, thought differently than I did. Coming to this campus, and particularly this very center, was one of the best things to ever happen to me. I realized that we are all connected in our differences, and that we exist alongside one another, that one cannot succeed without the support of the others. I met new people who broadened my mind, and I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to broaden the minds of others. Over time, I realized that my transness was not a shameful part of my past that I needed to hide, but a part of my history that I was proud of. Being a visible trans woman, I have been able to shatter misconceptions about trans people and get to know people who otherwise may have never met knowingly another trans person. I had to grow the confidence to know that no matter what anybody said, my womanhood was not diminished by my transness, but enhanced by it. The battles I have had to overcome to be who I truly am have made me stronger and wiser than that sad little kid I once was ever thought possible. While in college, I took many gender and women's studies courses, most of which were wonderful. I was too afraid to out myself as being transgender in most of them, but towards the end of my college career, I got a little more comfortable, and I thought how much I could contribute to the conversation, because trans people aren't, in my experience, talked about quite enough in the gender and women's studies courses. For the most part, this was great. I was able to provide firsthand experience, having lived, if only in youth, on both sides of the gender spectrum. This led to many enlightening conversations for my classmates as well as for myself, but it also shed a light on some of the antiquated ideas in the courses. I want to share a story with you of a time where I had to deal with some blatant transphobia on campus. Not from a student, but from someone who was supposed to be educating me, supposed to be supporting students in teaching gender and women's studies. Many of her past students have described her teaching as spreading TERF rhetoric, and it was taken to uncomfortable heights around the time that I was in class. TERF is an acronym that stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminism. There are a minority of feminists who exclude trans people, particularly trans women, in their advocacy for women's rights. And this is not only harmful to the transgender community, but it drives a wedge in intersectionality, which is so heavily taught in our courses. There was one class in which I ran into this way of thinking. I disclosed my trans identity to the class in an effort to have a deeper discussion of my experience of gender and womanhood. I felt a significant change in energy from the professor at the time, and from then on, she hardly allowed me to speak. Even in times when she would ask the class a question and I was the only one with my hand up, even when the other students commented on me being the only one with my hand up, she still would not call on me. I felt uncomfortable and unwelcome in the community that had once made me feel like I could be myself. Unsurprisingly, in 2020, this same professor wrote and published an article in which she compared transgender people to QAnon and the eugenics movement. QAnon is a disproven far-right conspiracy theory that claims there is a league of Satan-worshipping, cannibalistic child sex traffickers in government. In her writing, she implies that our existence is irrational, insane, and fueled by politics, anger, and hate, much like QAnon. She writes that the trans surgeries mirror the horrific forced sterilizations of minorities that took place in the 1920s and 1930s eugenics movement. That trans surgeries are leaving people, namely those assigned female at birth, quote, permanently scarred and destroyed, unquote. I don't know about all of you, but I don't know here, disfigured or destroyed. Hey girl! I find the comparison of life-changing and life-saving gender-affirming procedures that trans people have to jump through hoops to even get on a waiting list for, to the forcible sterilization and attempted genocide of minorities, to be absolutely preposterous. Mm-hmm. This GWS professor goes on to write that trans women are just trying to invade female spaces, that we are guiding young people into, quote, hormonal and surgical horrors that desex them. Now, yes, there are always going to be people who have something to say about how you live your life. This article wouldn't bother me a bit because I am secure in who I am and the knowledge that most people, upon reading that article, will know that it's egregious and outdated. However, my concern is that this same person that wrote such a hateful article about gender is then going on to a state-funded university and teaching gender and women's studies, teaching young students the future of America, that trans people are freaks who are disfigured and coming for your children and invading your spaces. This professor still works here. About 84% of Americans do not personally know someone who's transgender. That means 84% of people are basing their knowledge of the transgender community off of information that is given to them through the media and through higher education. Right now in this country and in countries all around the world, trans people, and especially trans women of color, are being murdered in record numbers, beaten to death in the streets, set on fire in our cars. Our unemployment rate is 3 times that of the national average and 4 times that for trans women of color. According to the Human Rights Campaign, 2021 is now the deadliest year on record for transgender individuals. At least 45 people have been murdered this year alone. And I say at least because in many cases, these murders go unreported. One of those 45 people was a good friend of mine, my trans mother, Jahira D'Alto. Jahira was a caring, loving person, a mother figure to many in the community. She lived in Boston, was a member of the House of Balenciaga, and was a well-known transgender advocate, as well as an advocate for survivors of domestic and sexual violence. Her life and the lives of so many others just like her, just like me, was taken from the world too early because of hate and discrimination. And so, in these cultural environments where we see this rhetoric being repeated that trans women are not really women, that trans men are not really men, that we have some sort of hidden agenda, that we are somehow duplicitous, that we're not who we say we are, is simply not true. And having that being preached by anyone, especially someone in a position of authority, is the basis of the discrimination that transgender people face. I stand in front of all of you now, in transparency, no pun intended, to show you that trans people are just like you. We are your friends, your partners, your coworkers, your parents, and your siblings. Each and every one of you here today has a unique story that brought them to where they are now. For as long as we've had language, humans have been storytellers, passing on lessons from one generation to the next. Now with the global community that exists on the internet, we have the ability to share our own stories on a scale unlike any other. And while this does mean that there will always be people trying to put you down, comparing you to QAnon and calling your body destroyed, it also means that we have the privilege to share our truth. With that privilege, I have made it my mission to shed a light on the transgender community. Through my content creation and my advocacy, I have been able to open the eyes of others to see that trans people are just like everyone else. And I have been lucky enough to demystify transition for trans people looking for guidance. If one person can watch my videos, if one person hears my speech tonight and feels less alone, I've done what I set out to do. What is so wonderful about the internet is that I am not the only person with this tremendous power. You are able to share your views, amplify the voices all around you with the click of a button. Comment, like, share. The interconnected nature of our identifiers means that one community cannot succeed without the support of the other. Often, even in the LGBTQ community, trans individuals get pushed to the back, are seen as taboo, or told, it's not your time yet. But the zeitgeist of our decade is one of progression. More and more we are seeing trans characters on TV shows, seeing trans politicians or STEM workers succeeding without needing to hide who they are. This progress is great, but there is still so much work to be done. Living in fear is not truly living. Transition wasn't something I did because I was brave. I transitioned out of necessity, and bravery followed. I was and will continue to be determined to be myself, no matter what struggles I have on the road ahead. To be who I am means that I have to work hard every day. I have to work for the right to use the restroom. I have to work to be seen by others for who I truly am. I have to work to be treated equally, even in academic spaces meant to make us feel included. Bravery is non-negotiable, because my very existence in this world causes friction and debate. It is determination that I have to establish in myself to keep going. Every day, I will be determined to continue living true to myself, and that is a promise I will always keep. The ways in which we create space for transgender individuals gives them the ability to live authentically. It is because of the trans people and allies that have come before me that I am able to live the life that I do. Their efforts have made history. Standing up for trans rights has made history. Amplifying trans voices has made history. The future belongs to us. So I ask you, are you ready to stand together and make history?